is already producing a huge straight line wind threat and unfortunately also producing a flash flooding threat. But between Franklin and Monroeville is where the part of the storm is located that could produce a tornado. Now, if you're in Monroeville, you're still going to get a nasty straight line wind threat when these storms approach you. So don't think that you're getting out of severe weather potential. But what we're watching is where the rotation signature is, and it looks like it's right there just south of Franklin and is going to be working its way to the east at 55 miles an hour, putting Beatrice in the path of this storm as it continues marching in a northeast direction. Now, once it moves out of Monroe County and past Conecuh County, it'll be outside of our viewing area, but we want to make sure we stay with this and monitor it as it continues its motion. And it's pretty much going to do what the other tornado warnings have done, be mostly a straight line wind threat, but there is going to be enough rotation that a quick spin up tornado could occur. Bear in mind, this is all a part of a line that's producing a lot of lightning, heavy rain. Unfortunately, flash flooding is also becoming a concern, and our thoughts have not changed on the fact that we may see this thing stalling around Interstate 10 by about 1 or 2 this afternoon and could bring flash flooding issues for parts of Mobile and Baldwin County. Now, the tornado threat will be lower by this afternoon, which is good, but the threat for heavy rain is going to continue because you look at how large this line of storms is. But you also notice how slow it is working its way toward the south. So if you're around I-10 right now, you're not getting anything. It's still going to be 2 or 3 hours before these storms start knocking on your doorstep because of the slow movement of this line as it's working its way southward, the squall line as it's pushing closer toward Mobile and Baldwin County. This is a 3-hour loop. And notice over the last 3 hours, we haven't seen it really move that far south. It pretty much went from the northern edge of Washington County to the southern end of Washington County. But that took 3 hours. Same thing in Clark County. It's taken roughly 3 hours for the storms to fully move out of there, and now pushing into parts of northern Monroe County, and part of that has spawned off a potential tornado warning near Spring Hill Baptist Church, also near the Beatrice Hunters Retreat, near Antioch Baptist Church, and it's going to keep, and it's also north of Fountain as it keeps working toward the north and east at 55 miles per hour. So this is, I believe, the 3rd or the 4th tornado warning we've had since 8 o'clock. Once we hit 8 o'clock, we started seeing numerous warnings going off. We did get confirmed damage from the tornado over Coffeyville earlier this morning, but whether or not we get anything confirmed from this, it remains to be seen. But we do have a signature right there just to the east of Alabama Highway 41 that could be producing a tornado that's going to be working its way to the north and east at 55 miles per hour, packing a punch with it over the next several minutes. So we are just going to stay with this and watch it as it slowly meanders its way out of Monroe County. As we've talked about this morning, this is going to be a long, severe weather event that's going to take a while. As mentioned, though, I do think the tornado threat will die off this afternoon, but it'll switch more to a flash flooding threat. Then we'll see things calming down by tonight. But the community of Keith is where that possible tornado is, east of Scratch Ankle, east of State Highway 41, approaching River Ridge, Scotland, and then if it holds together, Beatrice, right there around Alabama Highway 21. And it's near Davidson Cemetery. If you know where that is, that's where the tornadic signature is located. But right there around Keith is where your possible tornado is, with that little green color you're seeing on the velocity display, and it's moving east at 55 miles per hour. So a possible tornado showing up because of what the radar is indicating with inbound and outbound winds. This is something that we have seen a lot inside the squall line. Unfortunately, this probably will not be the last warning that we end up dealing with. We showed you video earlier from our Hal Sherrick, who was monitoring this line of storms as it was rolling through Thomasville. And for those of you who were with us for that, you saw how scary looking this line of storms is. You don't need to try to drive through any of this squall line. We want to hopefully see this thing weaken before it drops toward I-10, but if it holds together decent enough, it could easily produce flash flood warnings for Mobile and Baldwin County, but that wouldn't start till 1 or 2 this afternoon. So we're on the air because of this tornado warning that's in play for Monroe County until at least 10:45. So it's in play for the next 40 minutes, assuming it holds together. The Weather Service could cancel it if it looks like the tornadic signature is dead, but for now it is holding together around the community of Keith and continuing to march its way to the north and east at 55 miles per hour. But Matt, you saw on the 3-hour loop earlier that when you look at it in that aspect, it really hasn't dropped that far south in that amount of time. As you talked about it going more perpendicular, that is a big indicator that this thing is going to take a long time to get to Interstate 10.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Michael. You can see how it bends back to the west. It goes north and south up here around Jackson, up around Thomasville, but then it just bends backward to the west. And that tail end of it's going to take a while to come through. And also, as it lays down like that, that's where the flooding threat is going to come in as well. So we may well see this thing transition from a severe weather event to a flooding event as we go into the afternoon, depending on how all this shapes up. But you can really see how that drags back to the west. And I mean, it's past Baton Rouge right now. You know how long of a drive that is on I-10. So this is going to take a while for this whole thing to move on through because of the way it's doing so. It's not just sliding through like that. It is laid out now along the Gulf Coast, and it's just sort of dragging on through, and that's going to take some time. Once again, we're up here for a warning, tornado warning that is in northern Monroe County. Right now, it looks like it's a bit more over the some of the timberland up there, some of the woods, but it won't be too long before it's in Beatrice. So we really want to watch out in the Beatrice community. This is coming up your way.
Yeah, right here, Matt, you can see a little bit of an inflow right there in the radar imagery along this section of highways. It's getting ready to cross Alabama Highway 21. And we're going to stay with this because the tornado would be right over Beatrice. It's moving that quickly, so you need to be in shelter right now if you're in that part of Monroe County. You got the most lightning. It is the loudest part of the thunderstorm. The rain rate is significant, and the tornadic signature is just ahead of this band of rain that's about to roll right over Beatrice and continue marching just to the north of State Highway 21 as it veers into the northern edge of Monroe County and the northern edge of Conecuh County. But we're going to stay with this until the warning either is canceled or expires, but that will happen at about 10:45. We'll look to see if we can find a signature on radar based on the reflectivity. It would be right there. You're seeing that this is the velocity couplet. It would be right there over River Ridge, so it's going to be right on the doorstep of Beatrice really fast within the next couple of minutes if it's not there already. So what can you do if you live there? Be in shelter, lowest level of your home, away from doors and away from windows. It's going to be crossing Alabama Highway 265. This is McPherson Road. This is 265 Main Street, Lodge Road, Pineville located here. So if you know these streets and you know these communities, you got to take this threat seriously because the tornadic signature is rolling right over the northern edge of Beatrice, which it's right there west of Natchez, and it's going to be crossing Beatrice within the next minute to 2 minutes. It's moving very fast at 55 miles an hour. It does not give you a lot of time to get into shelter. Once it crosses over Beatrice, it's in a very rural section of Monroe County because, Matt, I don't know how much is actually along this section of State Highway 21 north of Riley. We're putting up some Grimes Cemetery is located there. Savannah Baptist Church, Indian Springs Baptist Church. So it is definitely a rural section of county. It is not a highly populated spot, but that's one reason why if people aren't paying attention to the weather up there, you know someone that's there, you got to give them the heads up and let them know they need to be taking this threat seriously and getting into shelter right now because you got a possible tornado west of Beatrice that's going to be marching its way north and east at 55 miles an hour. The Weather Service saying circulation increasing in the storm north of Greenville, but that's outside of our area. So the one we're watching is this one that's approaching Beatrice, and the storm threat is going to take quite a while to get through. If you did not catch the morning news or you did not catch Studio 10, now let's pull up the Fox 10 Futurecast and run this thing hour by hour so you can get a good look at what we're talking about with the flash flooding threat. I'm going to step out of the way and just watch this as Matt runs it into motion. That's noon. And notice it still isn't to I-10 yet. That's 1 in the afternoon, and it just now approaches I-10. Then we get to 2, and you still have soaking rain, and then watch this. It just doesn't move any farther south. That's 3, 4, 5, and 6, and it's still staying in the exact same places. So potentially for 4 hours, we could get bands of heavy rain and storms before by 7, and the sun sets, we start to see things finally dying off. That's why we think there's the chance that the threat shifts from a tornado threat and a straight line wind threat to a flash flooding threat during the second half of the day today, and something you need to be keeping in mind if you live in a low-lying or a rural spot around parts of Mobile and Baldwin counties. The Weather Service just said that that one is not for our area, that they were going to issue a tornado warning for Butler and Crenshaw counties, but that does not include us. We're following this one, the one that's north of Monroeville. Everyone's still underneath a tornado watch until 2. As mentioned, this is a 3-hour loop, and you can see over the last 3 hours, there really has not been a lot of movement with these storms. It has taken almost 3 hours for the storms just to pass through Hattiesburg, and just now is approaching Leakesville, around parts of Greene County. So that also tells you how much longer you got to wait for this thing to roll into parts of Mobile and Baldwin counties for our more highly populated spots of the Fox 10 viewing area. So your possible tornado is right over Beatrice. We're going to stay with this and monitor this. Obviously, you're getting a lot of lightning here. The storm is scary in itself because of the lightning, the thunder, and the heavy rain. The rain rate's significant around this section of Alabama Highway 47, getting ready to cross Alabama Highway 21 and moving to the north and east, and it's right over Alabama Highway 265. It is a nasty looking thunderstorm that you do not want to be outside in. You don't want to try to drive through. You want to wait for this thing to pass over your area before attempting to step outside. So whether or not a tornado is on the ground, you just have to think about the fact that this is a very dangerous, ugly storm just because of the lightning and the heavy rain. And the velocity display also shows that the wind rates are still significant with this storm. Now, we're not able to pick up a solid signature of where the tornado would be. That's also because, again, North Monroe County is so far away from the radar site because of the curvature of the earth. You're not going to get an accurate read that far away. The velocity display is much more accurate closer to Mobile Regional Airport because the beam is able to track more into the storm instead of so far aloft. So we are going to stay with this over the next few minutes. We have not gotten an update on whether or not the storms are holding together in Beatrice or not. We do have Hal Shurik, who's driving through Clark County. He was right around Thomasville when we had that tornado roll through earlier, and he got some amazing video, and you really got to see just how scary those storms were. Yeah, and Matt, in the last few sweep scans, it looks like obviously straight line wind threat, yes, but the rotation signature getting very hard to find.
Yeah, it certainly is. Once again, as this moves past Beatrice, we're back into Timberland once again as you approach Highway 21 there. So, over a rural area, the next communities that would be impacted by this would be McWilliams and Old Texas. So those are the areas I'll be watching out for next as this continues to work its way onto the east. And like Michael was saying, even if we don't have a tornado on the ground here, we've seen these things have wind gusts this morning, 60, 65 miles per hour. So you want to make sure you're not out and about in that one way or the other as we see this move on through. Big picture, once again, we got a bunch of storms out there. They trail back to the west over in and around Hattiesburg and then to point southward into Louisiana. But you can see how it's kind of laid down horizontally there across the deep south. And it's going to take a while for all that to pull on through, like Michael was saying, and that's going to create flooding concerns for us here later on in the day. Right now, the big concern is going to continue to be severe weather on the leading edge of all this. And when I say the leading edge, I mean basically this is going to be for around where we're seeing the tornado warning now in Monroe County to a little bit south there to around Uriah. And but then after that, we're looking at mainly severe thunderstorm warnings along that main line. For now, we're not seeing a whole lot. We're concerned, too, of some of these storms bubbling up out ahead of the main line. And I think that's going to be more of a concern for folks now over towards southeast Alabama. As you get over towards the Dothan area, it looks like they're going to have more instability over that way for some of these storms. That one just passed Evergreen looks like it's building. We've also got a few more off to the east of there. So they're going to be watching those, but those are out of our area. So we're looking at mainly just this line, and we could be talking about a real threat of some flooding later in the day as it goes along. Once again, on the right side of your screen, that is Clark County. Our Hal Shurik has been up there. He's been keeping an eye on things. From Clark County, we have gotten some unconfirmed reports, some damage in and around Coffeyville from an earlier storm. And so we'll keep you posted, see if there's any other damage up that way. We just got an update on that tornado warning. They will continue this. It's moving to the east at 50 miles per hour. So they've sliced the box back a bit. Beatrice is still included, but I think the storm is just past Beatrice at the moment. And once again, this area up here, it's timberland. There's not very many communities there between Beatrice and Highway 21. There's a few roads that we'll go ahead and mention these here. Pineville Street, Dollar Road here as well, Indian Springs Road. So there's a few roads out there, but for the most part, this is timberland. We're going to be watching it closely for McWilliams and Old Texas. Those are the next communities in line, a little bit down towards Riley as well, all included in this tornado warning as the storm continues to work its way to the north and east at around 50 miles per hour.
Yeah, it's moving at a really good speed, Matt. So hopefully it's not going to be impacting us much longer. But notice to the south, you have severe thunderstorm warnings covering every single spot along that line of heavy rain and lightning, which is working at a snail's pace down to the south and east. And not only do you get heavy rain and lightning within that line, you get ferocious winds, straight line winds of about 50 to 60 miles per hour that blow in one direction, as we've seen from storms that have shown up over the last several weeks. Straight line winds can cause major problems. We saw that happen around the Porch Creek Indian Reservation. We saw it happen just last Wednesday night with the storms that were blowing over the Mobile Bay. We're continuing to see that happening now. We've even had some unconfirmed damage reports around the Coffeyville community, and our big concern for this afternoon, if you live in Mobile and Baldwin County, you're going to want to pay attention to this, is not necessarily a severe thunderstorm and tornado threat, but a flash flooding threat. It could be an ugly one based on the fact that this line that's producing very heavy rain could stall right around the I-10 corridor and dump heavy amounts of rain over the same places for a long period of time, possibly several hours, 3 to 4 hours before things finally start to calm down later on tonight. So this is still going to be a long, pronounced, severe weather threat that we're going to have to deal with. And unfortunately, we've been dealing with at least one of these every single week. Matt's trying to find the tornadic signature with the velocity display, but at this point, it's just almost impossible. If there is one, it would be right here north of the community of Riley, and it would be in North Monroe County that would be working its way close towards State Highway 47, and eventually will shift out of our area. When that happens, we'll take you back to programming, and we'll just monitor the main line throughout the course of the day. Notice the main line is already shifting outside of the tornado warning box. Monroeville right now, you're getting just pounded with heavy rain and lightning, and this just goes to show that even though there's no tornado in this storm, it's still powerful. The straight line winds are around 60 to 65 miles an hour, which can knock down trees and power lines. And with the loud thunder from all of the lightning, it is a very scary thunderstorm. And because it's moving so slowly, it's sitting over you for a very long period of time. Same thing around Chatham. Same thing for Leakesville. You're going to be hearing that thunder for quite a while. And those of you that are watching us around Mobile and the Eastern Shore, you're probably thinking, well, what's severe weather? There's hardly anything going on out here. Well, it's going to be a while. Yesterday, that futurecast looked like this thing was going to move through like a speeding bullet. We were going to have the whole thing out of here by 2, and unfortunately, it has decelerated greatly. We started seeing that trend before we came on the air at 4:30 this morning, and so far things are playing out that way, where we still have a line of severe storms, but not one that's moving through at a fast speed. It's going to be I don't think it even reaches the coast today. I think those of you around Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, Pensacola Beach, you may not get a thing from this afternoon. I do think there's a real chance that happens, because when this thing dies off at 6 or 7 o'clock, we're not going to continue to see it sinking toward the south. I think if you're at the beaches, you'll have a better chance of dealing with thunderstorms tomorrow than you will today. But I think if you're around the I-10 corridor, which includes Mobile, the Eastern Shore, North Baldwin County, Bay Minette, be on the lookout for flash flooding potential starting at about 1 this afternoon, and then lasting to about 5 or 6 o'clock this evening. But the severe thunderstorm and tornado threat will wind down by that time, which is good. So there's sort of a positive and a negative. We'll run this on the Futurecast in case you missed it. Just look for yourself. We run this forward toward 1 in the afternoon. And you can see the storms just pretty much stay stuck around Interstate 10. They continue to pretty much just stay sitting there for several hours. Look at that, 2, 3, 4 in the afternoon, and they just don't move. And if the rain rates are as heavy as what the Futurecast is projecting, that's going to cause a lot of flash flooding problems. And look, even 5, 6 o'clock, you've still got big storms around that part of the area. And then by 7, 8 o'clock, it starts to fade out. Now, for several hours, it will go dry. I think it's going to be dry through the night, and it'll end up dry through the first part of tomorrow morning. But then we will have scattered severe storms during the afternoon on Wednesday as we keep pushing this thing forward. You'll notice by Wednesday afternoon, we end up getting another round of severe storms, but it's going to be more scattered based. It's not going to be widespread like what we've seen today. It's going to be very hit and miss. And then as we continue into the nighttime hours of Wednesday, finally, we get the cold front to push through and cross I-65 by about 9 o'clock Wednesday night. And then you'll notice the sky clearing early Thursday morning, and the stage is going to be set for much better and brighter weather conditions for the end of the week. Weather Service says that the rotation has broadened out on the storm segment east of Beatrice. The environment suggests it could organize again on the north end of the bow. Will maintain tornado warning for now. So that means for the time being, we'll stay with this. Of course, it's on the verge of moving out of our area, but we want to talk about something else right now. You see this right here on the camera shot? You see that rippling waves on the causeway? Even though we have not seen heavy rain and lightning reach the I-10 corridor yet, we've got a strong south wind. And when we have a strong south wind at high tide, we get causeway flooding almost every single time. High tide, if I remember correctly, Matt, from when we had it, this was about 2?
About 2, I believe.
About 2 this afternoon. So that means the odds of dealing with causeway flooding are going to be going up within the next few hours, regardless of where the rain is. By the time we get to high tide, combined with a very pivotal south wind, odds are the causeway, or at least sections of it, will be undrivable because of that fact. And then when we get to low tide, which will happen later on tonight, the waters will recede, causeway will likely reopen. But there's a very good likelihood that the causeway is going to have major flooding problems. I would say, if it's 10:20 right now, I would say within the next 2 to 3 hours, you're going to have sections of that road closed because of the south winds ahead of this boundary happening right at high tide. We see it happen almost every single time a major front is pushing its way through. So possible tornadic signatures now east of Beatrice. That's the good news. It still has a little ways to go to get out of our area. When it crosses this black line that my finger's on, then it moves outside of our area, and we'll no longer have to follow it here on the television side. We'll be monitoring, obviously, the whole system throughout the remainder of the day. But the reason why we wanted to point out the causeway is because even though the rain and storms haven't reached that section of the viewing area yet, high tide is a few hours away, and the south winds are looking pretty nasty, and that is going to cause a lot of problems if you have to travel that way. So you may want to be thinking ahead of time that the Bayway may be your best route if we have parts of the causeway that are shut down. Matt, we're continuing to follow this, but as we pointed out, the straight line wind is dangerous as the possible tornado threat.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Michael. We're looking at the leading edge of a Boeing line. When we talk about a Boeing line, that's the winds back there behind the system pushing through. And we're talking about winds 60, 70 miles per hour here as these Boeing segments make their way through. That bow is just a sign of the very strong winds that you'll find there at the front edge of these thunderstorms right in through here. So once again, the circulation in this storm has broadened out a bit. So we're not seeing the circulation showing us, hey, right here is likely a tornado. We're not seeing that at the moment here in northern Monroe County, but we are seeing some very strong winds continuing and the possibility of this thing quickly spinning back up. Like Michael was saying, almost out of our viewing area. So we're about done tracking this one on TV. My guess is as we go through this afternoon, they'll be getting a few more of those tornado warnings. And then at some point, I think we're likely to switch over to a flooding event because of the way this is all laid out here. It's not going to be coming through nice and cleanly like Michael was saying. It's kind of laid itself out horizontally, and that's going to mean a lot of rain going over the same spots over and over and over again. We call that training for an obvious reason. It's like trains on a track going over the same spots over and over again with very heavy rain. And we're already seeing, we have a number of flash flood warnings off to the west of us. I'll get this loaded up here in a second. It's the crimson colored boxes are the flash flood warnings. Get this thing down. There we go. So here it is around Hattiesburg. You see all these crimson boxes. That's the flash flood warnings because they've already seen that. They've already seen those storms flatten out and start to move from west to east across the area. You know, instead of being a north-south line, now it's laid out horizontally, and that allows those storms to go over the same spots over and over again. So anticipate those flash flood warnings moving south and east and into our area as the afternoon goes along. Michael?
Well, I was just hearing from our producer that our own Tyler Finger live starting to already see some flooding concerns there. That's something we mentioned because high tide's coming. High tide's coming, and you got a south wind, and that is a recipe for trouble. And because high tide is coming at, Matt, you said 2 this afternoon, that's pretty much going to put it in a situation where we're going to end up with major flooding problems for the causeway. So if you travel the causeway, make sure you consider the Bayway today, or you may have to take the Dolly Parton to get around and then take Highway 225 south into Baldwin County. Now you got the crews standing by. They haven't shut anything down yet, but they are standing by in case they have to because the water is continuing to spill over, and it's only going to get worse over the next several hours, because if high tide's not till 2 and that south wind, believe me, it's not going anywhere. We're going to continue to deal with a major issue on the causeway as we approach midday and roll into the early afternoon hours. But to kind of wrap up why we've been on the air, it's because of a tornado warning for North Monroe County that's eventually about to work its way out. And when that happens, we'll take you back to programming, and we'll continue to run the crawl so that way you can follow this throughout the rest of the morning on your screen, and we'll jump back in if we have any new tornado warnings. But do want to emphasize, if you live in Mobile or the Eastern Shore, causeway flooding looking very likely for the next several hours. And if you are trying to drive the causeway anytime soon, just know that by the time we get to 11, especially noon, there's likely going to be parts of that road that are going to be closed because of that south wind combined with high tide. Usually when we see causeway flooding, it has almost nothing to do with actual rainfall. It usually always correlates to the south wind hitting at high tide because that water spills over onto the causeway and it gets major flooding problems right around the on-ramps and the off-ramps. And that's why we have those crews standing by in case they do have to close sections of that road because of the flooding concerns. But Matt, it looks like we're going to be able to sign off sooner rather than later, thankfully. But we're definitely not even close to being done with this severe weather threat because, as we've talked about, we are going to transition from a straight line wind / tornado threat into a flash flooding threat that is going to really impact parts of Mobile and Baldwin counties within the next few hours.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at. So we think we'll make that transition here before too long. Once again, we're keeping an eye on that tornado warning. It looks like that area is about out of our viewing area, that circulation we're watching. So we're about to let you get back to programming here. But myself, meteorologist Michael White, and of course, Chief Meteorologist Jason Smithy's around as well. We're all going to be tracking this for you as we go through the afternoon, keeping you update on the latest with this severe weather event as it works its way through. Michael?
Thanks a lot, Matt. And we will jump back in if need be if we get any new warnings. Just remember, we got a ways to go before the severe threat's done. Flash flooding threat knocking on the door of Mobile and Baldwin County within the next few hours. Have a great rest of your Tuesday and stay safe.